Thanks very much, Cahir. Look, I suppose it's a bit like being invited to speak at your own funeral here today. Usually we talk about political careers after people have passed away. And I suppose I'm conscious of the fact that I did manage to be late for this, which is possibly an achievement that I never thought I could achieve, alive or dead. I'd like to begin by thanking the people of Clare for electing me to this House. It's a unique honour to be elected, as I think everybody in this chamber would say it's a unique honour to be elected. I would say it's a particular honour to represent Clare. When you walk around the corridors of this House, you see portraits of people who represented Clare before me with huge distinction. So it's I suppose an honour that sits heavily on one's shoulders, and you're aware of the responsibilities that you have, as every TD is. As Deputy O'Riordan said, and we recalled being elected in 2011, we were elected on the same day in 2011, indeed in the same party in 2011, which I don't know which of us might like to forget that more. Maybe neither of us, I would hope sometimes, but there you go. But when we were elected, as he said, we come from somewhere, and I came from a house. My parents were elderly, and they had a belief in the state that maybe doesn't exist as much now as it did among that generation. And there was an older man again in the house who stood in a line at the age of 14 when this state was being founded, with nothing to offer but the sweat off his back. And he had a ferocious belief in this state. And a belief in the system of government, and a belief that it would make lives better. Maybe not just his life, but the lives of those who came after him. And that's hugely important, that belief in a state, because I don't know that that really exists anymore, and that connection between governed and those who govern them is fraying, and I think it's something that we need to address. People don't feel connected to a state. People question whether a government exists for their benefit or whether it doesn't. And I think, and I could be wrong in this, that we need to explain a lot more why government decisions are made, how they're made, and for whose benefit they're made. Because it's not always apparent that they are. The government will, of course, say that they're always made for the betterment of the majority. That's not always apparent to people. That doesn't mean that the government is wrong and that they're not making decisions for the betterment of the majority, but we do need to explain it. So Parliament, to me, and the Dáil to me, has always been about asking questions, about having them answered, and asking questions on behalf of people. Not to be awkward, but to ensure that that connection between the government and the governed is maintained, and that people understand that decisions are being made for their benefit, and that governments feel that they have to explain to people why they're making decisions and how they benefit people. Because if you lose that, and I think there's a tendency sometimes of a permanent government to regard elected representatives as sometimes awkward, because they are awkward. Because they have to be awkward, because life is awkward, and elected representatives, more than a permanent government, have to respond to that awkwardness. But it is important that government is accountable, and that interplay between elected representatives and the unelected government and people is vital to maintain, because if you lose it, well, we know what happens when you lose it. Ultimately, it all is very hard to reignite or to recreate that confidence. So look, I began by thanking the people of Clare. It's a huge honour that they have bestowed upon me, and I'd now like to thank the people of Ireland South, who have bestowed a different and as great an honour upon me to represent Ireland South in the European Parliament, where equally, where there's a necessity to maintain that link and to explain decisions and have decision makers explain them. I'd like to thank Deputies Pat Daly and Padraig O'Sullivan, who I presume came here to support me as constituents here today. Thank you both very much for being here. I would but like to say just one last thing, speaking on what Deputy Cowan said about politics being a safe profession. That is hugely important. But I think what's also important is that people feel that politics is a profession that they can aspire to. And again, you wonder, or I wonder sometimes, whether, you know, the inequalities, as other speakers have alluded to, both Deputy Function and Deputy O'Riordan, are growing. But I mean, I grew up in a part of East Clare at a particular time when there weren't that many inequalities, but everybody believed that the Republic was for them. And everybody believed that they could aspire to any position in the Republic, that they could aspire to running for election, that they could aspire to joining professions, that they could aspire to as full a life as possible. And I just wonder, is that shrinking? Not just in Clare, but is that shrinking across our state? Are there more and more young people in our state who don't think that it is necessarily their state and they can sit in its parliament? Or they can sit in its court, or they can represent people in its court, or they can do whatever it is they want to do because it is their republic and their right. And if that is shrinking, then I say we are failing as a legislature, we're failing as a people. And I think, you know, we often walk around here. I had the pleasure to bring a young Ukrainian law student around here earlier today, and you see those who made a lot of sacrifice, people who died for what they believed and whose portraits are hanging in these walls. But I think we have to question whether we're serving their legacy if we're allowing that space to shrink, if we're allowing the proportion of the population who believe that they can be here, that they have a right to be here, that they have a right to join, that they're a member of the political class and a right to aspire to being elected here. If that's shrinking, then I suggest that we're failing, and it's something that I hope I'm wrong in. So look, as I terminate my time here, I'd just like to thank you all very much for your patience, your indulgence, and especially to those who voted for me and those who voted at elections in which I participated, whether I was successful or not. I thank you very much.
I think it'll be remiss